So Russell Wilson recently became the highest paid player in NFL history due to a 4-year, $140 million contract extension. It also included a $65 million signing bonus, which seems pretty crazy that in one day you can pick up $65 million just like that. People are going to argue back and forth, is he worth it? Does it make sense to give a quarterback that kind of money? And personally, I'm not a mathematician, I don't really know. To be honest, my whole philosophy seems to be if you can get a player, just try to pick him up, and it's just assumed that you can find a cap space somewhere else to pick up someone else if you have to. People can easily say, oh, just get rid of him and try to draft a quarterback so that way you can have a quarterback on a rookie deal. But the fact of the matter is, rookie quarterbacks are so fluky, you never know if they're going to be good or bad. And if you have a sure thing at quarterback, sometimes it is worth it to overspend just to make sure that they're on your roster. So to determine if Russell Wilson is worth his contract, let's first start breaking down just how good Russell Wilson is. One thing he's great at is plays like this. If you take a look, it's going to be a cover 3 zone, and they're actually going to be running play action here, which is very valuable. The Seahawks run a lot of play action, and for very good reason, because for one thing, they just run the ball a lot, and because they do that, this can now open up a lot of things down the field. So if you notice, since this is going to be a play action pass, really the idea is you want to draw those linebackers in. If you draw the linebackers in, you're able to throw the ball past them, and you're able to hit somebody for a decent gain. That's the way play action in theory is supposed to work. But now, one thing you're going to want to take a look at is the 49er who is in coverage further to the top half of the screen is actually going to be cutting down as there is a Seahawk running in that direction. He's kind of in a bit of a dilemma because if he doesn't do this, it could allow the Seahawk to get open, but since he is doing this, this is now leaving what he was initially in charge of covering completely uncovered. He actually kind of realized that he probably shouldn't be cutting over at this point, but it's kind of too late. He's already committed, so he's basically going to try to do here is tell the other 49er in the area to then cut up to the top half of the screen and make sure he covers up that top half of the screen. But honestly, that's just not something you should realistically be expecting to happen. It'd be a very tough play for a linebacker to make, and Russell Wilson knows that. And you can tell he knows that by the way he's actually looking at the Seahawk who is cutting to the top half of the screen right away. A lot of quarterbacks would just throw this ball now and just get rid of the ball and pick up the yards they can have because the receiver is open. But Wilson's going to be very patient on this play. I love patience as a quarterback when Wilson is very patient. He's going to wait for the receiver to get wide open as opposed to just open, and when he finally does hit him, it turns what would have just been a first down into a game-changing play. I think this next play will actually show off a lot of Wilson's strengths. It's going to be zone coverage, but actually what's going to happen here is San Francisco has an extra man dropping back into coverage. So this now means that there's going to be 8 defenders in the end zone, and because the Seahawks are throwing the ball, this now means that they have very little room to operate. This would be, of course, a great time to run the ball. However, of course, since the Seahawks have an empty backfield, San Francisco feels pretty confident they're not actually running the ball. And that actually might be why there is an extra man in coverage. A lot of times what defenses will do is if a defensive tackle realizes that there is going to be an empty backfield, he'll just drop back into coverage. That might be what's happening here, or it could have just been what the play design was initially. But anyways, take a look at what's going to happen here. Wilson's already in a shotgun, and he simply just takes one step back. So he's actually not too far back, but he is a little bit far back. But one thing that's going to happen here is the 49er is actually going to give up containment to try to get the Wilson to the inside. Now, what a lot of quarterbacks would do is say, okay, great, containment has been given up. This now means that I can run around to the outside and scramble and now have all the time I want to try to make a throw. But of course, the problem with something like that is if Wilson were to scramble to the bottom half of the screen, this is now cutting his options in half. And actually even less so, since there are 3 Seahawks to the top half of the screen, meaning that Wilson really only have 2 guys to try to throw the ball to. So instead, he's simply just going to step back and now give him more time to make a throw. Also worth noting, there is something developing on the top half of the screen. There is going to be a Seahawk who's going to be cutting right over there, which will in theory draw the 49er who's in charge of covering him also to go in that direction. And then another Seahawk, and this is totally scramble drill at this point, this isn't anything designed, but what the other Seahawk is going to do is basically fake as if it was going inside closer to the middle of the field, and then of course his assigned defender is going to have to also cut in that direction, and then he can just cut to the outside. You know, basically at this point, the way it works is all zone coverage becomes man if there is enough time, because you have to make sure you're covering someone. So because of this, a Seahawk gets open, and Wilson is able to make a tremendous throw despite it not being the best angle, and it results in a touchdown. It's definitely a bit of a risk. If he lobs that one up there, it could result in an interception, or if he just throws it farther to the right side of the screen, it could result in an interception. But it was a great throw. His vision's really what I like about him, and really, I mean, as your quarterback, that's basically what matters the most, is knowing what's going on. There's really no other position like it. The fact of the matter is, there's no such thing as a great NFL quarterback who doesn't have a high football IQ. I mean, I suppose you could say safety, but it's still not to the same degree as quarterback. Like on this play, it is going to be a cover 3 zone, which should be pretty good news for the Seahawks, as they do have a receiver who's running right into that gap in coverage right there. So this now means that there is a dilemma for that 49ers defender. I mean, he can either try to cut up and try to cover up that gap in coverage, but of course if he does that, this now means that he's abandoning his initial assignment, and if someone does run in that area, that could allow them to get wide open. And since there is a Seattle player running in that area, this now makes things perfect for Russell Wilson. But the thing is, he has to make his read correctly. First things first, he has to look over and check and see if that receiver who is running the crossing route into that gap in coverage is going to be open. And as of right now, it kind of looks like he is, but he isn't. And the reason why he's not is because there is a defender who's cutting in right now. He's going to make sure he closes up that gap in coverage, which is debatable as to whether or not it is a good decision or not. I mean, on one hand, he is not going to allow that receiver right there to get wide open in just one other second, but the fact of the matter is, who knows if you're actually going to get another second. I mean, right now, there's a lot of pressure going on right there. So you might be just banking on the fact that maybe your defensive line can get to the quarterback quick enough. But Wilson's able to step up in the pocket and make a perfect throw from very far away, and it results in a Seattle touchdown. That was a great read from Wilson, and also great pocket awareness. Being able to move around in the pocket is so important, and obviously Russell Wilson is one of the best in the game at it. But it's not just that, it's also his scrambling ability that everyone loves to talk about, and so let's get into what makes that so effective. Like on this one, it's going to be a man coverage play, and it's going to be a cover one, meaning that safety is going to be staying back. Also, the other Kansas City Chief is going to be kind of creeping up to the top half of the screen because there are 3 receivers in that area. He's basically saying, hey, I'm assuming this is a passing play, so I'm going to creep up and try to make sure I knock something away if there is a pass in that direction. And also worth mentioning, due to the fact that there are 3 Chiefs defensive backs who are all to the top half of the screen, it gives Wilson a pretty good idea that it is going to be man coverage. And that matters because take a look at what you're going to see right here. The Chiefs' interior lineman basically cuts to the inside of that guard. And since, of course, the other Chief on the bottom half of the screen is cutting around to try to get around Russell Wilson, this now creates an easy gap right in the middle of them where Wilson can try to run through. So he says, hey, if you're going to give it to me, I'll take it. I mean, everyone is either far down the field or to the top half of the screen, and there's a wide open gap for me to run right there. I mean, that one was almost too easy for him. They basically just gave it to him, but hey, how often do you see a situation like that happen, and a quarterback is too afraid to run the ball? I mean, Wilson could have tried to wait and let a play develop, but he said, hey, I can pick up a first down right now, so why do I have to? And really, it's a smart thing to do. But of course, we all know that when you're against man coverage, it's a good idea for a quarterback to run the ball. I mean, that's been beaten to death. But typically in zone coverage, it's a little more difficult, right? And yes, it is more difficult. However, that doesn't mean it can't be done. Like on this one, it's going to be a cover 4 zone. It means there are only going to be 3 defenders who are in the midfield. So this now means that there are going to be 2 gaps in coverage right there. You know, that's where you want to have a passing play too. But also worth mentioning, it doesn't just have to be a passing play to take advantage of those gaps in coverage. Like as you see right now, a Chiefs defender is once again going to do a very good job of crashing in and getting very close to Russell Wilson. But this is where Wilson's patience comes in. He sees that the guard does have inside leverage and will push that Chiefs defender past him to the bottom half of the screen. So instead of getting concerned and freaking out and trying to just throw the ball away, he's basically just going to wait and allow the guard to push him around him. And once he does that, he can easily run through that gap in coverage where typically you try to pass the ball to and pick up a decent gain. He even got the first down out of it, which he wouldn't have gotten if he just threw the ball away, obviously. That's one of those things that I really like about Russell Wilson's scrambling ability is he doesn't just scramble for the sake of scrambling. A lot of guys will scramble because they don't have faith in their arm, and that's not Russell Wilson at all. He certainly doesn't rely on his ability to scramble to gain some yards, however, he does use it as a tool in his toolbox. This one will be another good example. It's a cover 1 hole play, and actually what you're going to want to take a look at is that edge rusher right there, as he's basically going to be going around to the bottom half of the screen. So doing this now means that the Seahawks left tackle will also be breaking in that direction to try to block him. What the Seahawks is going to try to do is instead of blocking him straight up, basically block him around Russell Wilson, and he actually does that very well and is very successful at doing that. This is key because it gives up containment and allows Russell Wilson to attempt to try to run to the bottom half of the screen for some yards. So this now means that Russell Wilson can break to the bottom half of the screen to try to pick up some yards. However, Broncos also have a linebacker who's in the area. So basically, this isn't going to be a game-changing run if he does decide to run it, and a lot of players would try to make a pass here instead. This is a 2nd down and 10, and basically if Wilson decides that he's going to scramble, it's essentially saying, you know what, we're going to have to convert on 3rd down. But he's going to run anyways because he knows that's a lot easier to convert a 3rd down and 3 than it is to convert a 3rd down and 10. He could try to wait for something to happen, but the fact of the matter is, more often than not, something isn't going to happen this late in the play, and he's basically going to throw an interception, throw the ball incomplete, and it's just not going to be a good play. That's just one of the things I love in a quarterback, and so it's one of the things I love in Russell Wilson, is being able to be smart and know what to do in certain situations. So he's a really smart player, but of course there are some flaws. You know, kind of as the saying goes, you stare at any painting long enough, you'll find some sort of flaw. Well, if you stare at any play quarterback long enough, you will find something that you don't love. And here's something that I don't love. Right off the bat, Denver's going to be faking as they're going to be running a heavy blitz here. But they're actually not at all. It's just cover 3 zone, but they're faking as though it could be a blitz, which is why they have so many people on that line. The Seahawks have a receiver running right there, and that's actually a pretty good receiver to try to throw to. Because everyone is going to have to drop back into their coverage very quickly, this means that receiver could end up getting open. But if you take a look right now, this play doesn't really work out the way you'd want it to. I mean, really the receiver isn't open at all. However, Wilson is still going to try to throw it there anyways. This is kind of one of those, it would have worked on paper, however in practice it just didn't work out because that Denver Broncos player did a very good job of dropping back into coverage very quickly. It's a throw that shouldn't have been made and Wilson just happened to make it, and he's going to do something very similar on this very next one. It's going to be kind of similar to a pick play, where they're going to have that receiver run out and block that defensive back right there, and then they're going to send another receiver to cut in, and again, on paper, this makes perfect sense, because the next nearest corner is that guy way over there. That's a long way for that Cardinal to run, so typically you think this play should work out fine. So basically, in theory, if there was no opposing corner in this play whatsoever, then you want to throw the ball right there. Hit your receiver in stride in the chest, allow him to catch the ball, and then pick up as many yards as possible. That would make total sense. But the problem is, that corner is fastly approaching, so this kind of turns it into a 50-50 ball. Basically, where you want to pass it is probably low and closer to that receiver. This now means that the receiver wouldn't be able to pick up too many yards after the catch. However, he could try to make a diving catch, or more of a sliding catch actually. It would pick up some decent yards, maybe even the first down, and then you're in good shape. But Wilson instead tries to throw it where there's that 50-50 ball and basically goes for a home run play, and it ends up being a home run play, but just for the wrong team. I'm sure when I show that play, you guys probably think, that seems eerily similar to another play. And so while I'm on that topic, let's really get into what went wrong for the Seahawks on that play. It's the same concept basically, it's at the 1 yard line instead of at midfield, but same idea, a pick play where you're going to have the first receiver in that stack formation go out the block, and then you'll have the second receiver cut over the middle. So as of right now, there is decent separation, but what really matters isn't just the separation, but where the ball is going to be. I mean, you can have as much separation as you want, but if you throw it straight to the defensive back, well then the separation didn't matter. Now again, no defensive back in the area, you'd probably want to throw it right there, hit the receiver in stride, and let him walk in for a touchdown. You have to be careful. I'm not saying you need to throw it right there, right next to the receiver. I mean, you can kind of throw it in between those two red dots, but the fact of the matter is, if you throw it right there, it turns into a 50-50 ball where either player has a chance. But since he threw it over there, the pass is intercepted by Malcolm Butler, as Al Michaels said, and it resulted in the game-ending interception. Some could even argue the dynasty-ending interception. And I know some people will say, well, maybe that's what he was trying to do and he just missed the throw, but personally, I don't believe that. Wilson is so accurate. I think that he really did try to throw it right there because he wanted to make sure they got a touchdown on that play. But he didn't have to do that. It's second down and goal. They have 20 seconds left and a timeout. So even if the ball was caught and they got tackled at the 1 yard line, you could still call a timeout and live to play another down. I know that's not the aggressive thing to do, but as a quarterback, your job isn't to be aggressive. Your job is to be smart. You have to play things safe sometimes. This is one of those times you have to play things safe, and Wilson totally did not do that. And of course, I'm totally beating a dead horse talking about a play from 5 years ago, but I do think it is worth mentioning when I'm talking about Russell Wilson. Basically, I'm saying he's not flawless. He does have his flaws, and so those kind of things. He does have a tendency to not know exactly where to place the ball relative to that receiver. Really, I don't actually think that's a huge deal. I mean, it did come back to bite him in the worst of times there, but it's really not the end of the world. I mean, he doesn't do it too often, and the fact of the matter is he only had 7 interceptions last year. Although granted, he doesn't throw the ball as much as a lot of these other guys do, so maybe that's more equivalent to a 10 interception season from someone else. Now, there is one more thing I do want to talk about when I'm talking about Russell Wilson, and it is the fact that while their offensive line has definitely been much improved last season, it's still not great. I definitely wouldn't go as far as to say it was bad. I definitely think it's mediocre at this point, but one thing worth mentioning is that's kind of why you don't pay a quarterback big money. At least that's the theory behind it. Because if you don't pay a quarterback big money, that means that you can then build a good offensive line. Like on this play, for example, the Cardinals are going to have 7 men on the line, and the Cardinal all the way over to the right side of the screen is actually going to be dropping back into coverage. So this now means that, okay, just thinking about it logically, there are going to be 6 guys rushing the passer, and the Seahawks have 6 offensive linemen, so they should all have just one-on-one blocks. And also, Seattle has a halfback in the game blocking as well, so this shouldn't be the end of the world for Seattle. So what's going to happen on the right side of the screen is that those 2 Seahawks are actually going to be double teaming the edge rusher right over there. Now, of course, doing this does leave an Arizona Cardinal completely unblocked, but that's okay, because the Seahawks have a halfback who can easily run over and block him. Except there's one problem, and the problem is that those 2 Seahawks right over there are also going to be double teaming a Cardinal. This is not going to leave another Cardinal unblocked, but then of course the problem is that the Seahawks don't have another halfback to block him. Basically, since they only really had 1 halfback in the game, they can only really afford to do this in 1 spot of the field. But since they try to do it in 2 spots of the field, this now leaves the Cardinal completely unblocked and is able to easily get to Wilson for a sack. Wilson's great at scrambling, but there's no getting out of that one. I mean, that's just too easy for Arizona. The Seahawks are a pretty well-rounded team, but that probably is one area they still could use some improvements. But that being said, you watched just basically any play last season and you would see a play like this from the Seahawks offensive line just because they really weren't great. They've definitely taken drastic improvements and could continue to take great improvements. I mean, Seattle's been pretty good at developing talent pretty much everywhere else, so who's to say they can't continue to do that in offensive line as well? So then the question becomes, well, is Wilson worth the contract? And in my opinion, yeah, I kind of think he is. I mean, I know people are going to be saying, well, wait a second, the Seahawks run the ball so much, why do they need to pay a quarterback big money? Why don't they just trade the Giants for their 2 first-round picks, then they can draft Dwayne Haskins, have an additional first-round pick, and $30 million in cap room? And I'll be honest, that does sound pretty appealing. I definitely get the idea behind that. I mean, you're not just trading Russell Wilson for the first-round picks at that point. You're trading Russell Wilson for the first-round picks and also whoever you can get in free agency with that money. But the reason why I like them keeping Russell Wilson is because Russell Wilson plays quarterback, which is so important. And Seattle does such a good job of developing talent everywhere else through the draft. They draft so well that I trust them to be able to fill up any holes that they have through the draft. A lot of people talk about you can't pay a quarterback big money. Well, you can if that quarterback is good. In my opinion, Russell Wilson is borderline, if not definitively, a top 5 quarterback, so why not pay him the big money to keep him on your team? Maybe he won't be throwing 50 times a game like the Steelers have Ben Roethlisberger do, but the fact of the matter is, he's still the most important player on their roster. You can't afford to pay certain stars big money in the NFL, and if they feel they're ready to compete, and they feel that they can fill up any potential holes they have through the draft, then it's probably worth it to keep him on your team for another year.